Cabinet Member for Planning, Licensing and Housing.
Mike Carter, St Anne's Ward Councillor and Cabinet Member for Environment, Transport, Climate Emergency and Deputy Leader of the Council.
Isidorus Diakidis, Councillor Tottenham Green and Cabinet Member for Finance and Transformation.
Thank you all. Do we have apologies tonight?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillors Chandwani and Davies.
Thank you, Felicity. Any items of urgent business?
No.
Any declarations of interest tonight from any Cabinet members? Councillor Das Neves.
Chair, I need to make a declaration of interest relating to item 12 because I'm a trustee of the Selby Trust.
Thank you. Any other declarations? No. Okay. So just on to item 5, which is the notice of intention to conduct business in private, any representations received and the response to any such representations. So just to note that items 19 to 24 will be conducted in private. So moving on to item 6, minutes. Can we confirm the minutes from the 13th and the 22nd of July? That's a correct record. Can we agree on? Agreed. Thank you. Item 7, matters referred to Cabinet by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
We haven't received any.
Thank you. Moving on to item 8, deputations, petitions and questions. And I believe we have a petition and 2 deputations tonight. So there has been a petition that's been received from the Bounds Green residents who are living in the proposed Bounds Green LTN-C area in relation to the proposed plans for an LTN in the area. Just to thank you. So just to state that I am formally accepting the petition. And in terms of deputation, so we do have 2, and the first one tonight is the deputation in relation to the petition I've just received, and this has been put forward by Vicky Leonard. Thank you, Vicky. Vicky Leonard, you will have 3 minutes in total to address the Cabinet, and then Cabinet members can put some questions to you, and then the Cabinet member responsible will respond to the issues you've raised in the deputation. So whenever you're ready, you have 3 minutes. Please feel free to introduce yourself as well.
I'm fine to begin. I'm Vicky Leonard from Winton Avenue in the proposed LTN for Bounds Green C. Good evening. At the start of the online consultation on proposed LTNs for Bounds Green, Councillor White, who was then in charge, said the schemes would only go ahead with resident support. Subsequently, residents asked Sustrans, your LTN advisors, if the proposal would be withdrawn if there was no popular support. They replied, no, this isn't a referendum. In June, Councillor Hakata met residents concerned by these inconsistencies and told them that they must have misheard Councillor White. Understandably, they inferred that implementation had been predetermined and the consultation was mere window dressing. In a recent response to Catherine West MP, the Council has reverted to Councillor White's original position, stating, the results of the consultation will inform if the proposals are progressed to the implementation phase, as well as the specific design of any scheme that is decided to be implemented. On page 2 of the document we've supplied, we set out the gunning principles of public consultation. The first states that predetermined outcomes invalidate consultations, and the last stipulates that councils should take the product of consultation conscientiously into account and should be able to show evidence. Residents will expect the consultation report to show clearly that the council has implemented this principle. We've also provided you with clear definitions of an LTN's primary purpose, as set out by the organisations you've relied on to inform this process, that primary purpose being to prevent or reduce through traffic. I'm here tonight to present the results of our own consultation and to request that they're included in both the present consultation and the Cabinet report in October. We've knocked on every door in 12 streets within the proposed Bounds Green LTN-C. The basis of our petition is the rejection of the Council's current scheme and approval for an alternative that addresses our area's main problem, the evening rat run. 94% of households reject the council's current plan. The same 94% support our alternative option. This devolves on the cameras already in the council scheme, but timed to deal only with the problem of rat running on weekday afternoons and early evenings. Residents accept that their own access will also be curtailed during this period. The planters in the 2 other locations would stay in place. It is widely accepted that LTNs cannot work without the support of the local community. And to make it crystal clear, 94% of residents reject council's proposal to close our roads to through traffic 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They are rightly angry that you haven't listened to the weight of objections raised during the consultation. Finally, it isn't inconsistent to support the general principle of reducing or slowing traffic whilst vigorously opposing the council's version of an LTN. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And almost exactly to time. I was just checking, but almost exactly to time. So thank you for that. I'm going to open it up to the Cabinet for questions. So do any of my colleagues have any questions to Ms Leonard? No. Okay, I'm going to turn to Councillor Hakata, who's going to provide a response.
Thank you, Vicky, and Jill, for the petition and for your deputation. And obviously we did meet before. What I would say is that we are essentially on the same page, which is that we all want to reduce overall traffic in the area. And to this end, what was absolutely imperative to the council was to engage with local residents across the borough, but especially obviously in the areas that we are looking at implementing these solutions. And we have gone to unprecedented levels in order to do that. So there has been a series of engagements which have led to the designs that we have now. So the designs that we have are not being imposed, they have been co-designed with residents through a series of workshops and meetings. Now, we also understand that not everyone is necessarily going to know about, even though we did do letter drops to every address, we understand that, especially early on in that process, people aren't necessarily going to know what the process is itself. So the consultation, just to clarify as well, that the consultation period that we are now in is part of that engagement process. So any feedback that you have and are giving us is being fed into this process, will be fed into the designs and will be looked at as we go into the next phase. The next phase is also an engagement phase. It is also a consultation phase where we will be listening. We are listening now. We will be listening through that phase to see, but also the key with the next phase is we will be doing that in situ, so that people can really understand the positive and potential negative impacts, right, which we cannot see by symbols on a map. So by having it physically in place, you'll be able to see whether, in fact, traffic increases, decreases, whether walking, cycling increases or decreases, whether air quality improves or doesn't. So all of those things, the data and your experiences on the street will then feed into the final design of those schemes, in which the idea, everything is on the table. So the ideas that you have put forward will also be fed into that process. So, you know, I think the clarification that you need is that ultimately, yes, we have looked at schemes, and in the workshopping phase and in the early engagement phase, there wasn't a call from local residents to not do it at all. They were talking more about how we could tweak the designs, not have them at all. And we're going to look forward, and obviously if we end up with complete gridlock, if we end up with increased decreased air quality, etc., then we'd obviously have to revise on a massive scale. We believe that we will achieve the same goals that you want, that we want, which is to reduce overall traffic, to improve air quality and safety in the borough.
Thank you, Councillor Hakata. So there's been a request from the deputation party to respond. Obviously, it's not in the standing orders, but I will allow it. So I'll allow you a couple of minutes. Yeah. Apologies, is it somebody outside? I didn't realise. Okay, so someone's asked, so I'll allow them 2 minutes to respond.
Thank you for letting me in. I really felt the need to respond urgently to what you just said, which is untrue. There's been no co-consultation, none whatsoever, and not all streets have been notified. I live on a street, Torrington Gardens, no one was notified. No one received any notification or any request to get involved for consultation until 2 weeks ago in August. That was the first that we were formally informed about this. I'm absolutely fuming from what you just said. There's no co-design whatsoever. Can you show me the co-design? Can you point to it? Can you show it? Because 94% of residents have said no. We're incensed at what has been suggested, which is effectively making our area into a ghetto. We have no option but to access our homes via one major road, Bounds Green Road, which is heavily congested right now because of the problems of the LTN that was imposed in Enfield. And we have an alternative, which is Durnsford Road, which is backed up to the hill right now because of the same LTN. And if you impose this LTN on us, we'll be forced to live in this traffic jam to access our homes. We live in the bottom of a hill. We have a lot of people who are over the age of 60, who are elderly, who have health issues, who have to walk up a hill because you're proposing that we walk and we cycle everywhere. We have families, I have children in schools that are not on my doorstep. We have to be able to get to and from our homes because we have to live and work in our homes now. We can't all be everywhere via cycling or walking. Now, we have agreed in principle to having something to reduce the rat running in our area. But we have, please, I want this to be very, very clear, we have not agreed to what you've suggested. We are very, very against what you have suggested. And if you're telling us that we have co-consulted with you in the design of this strategy, that's a fib. I'd like to see exactly where that consultation has happened.
Can I ask you to close, please?
I'm sorry.
Can I ask you to finish?
I'm so sorry. But I'm really, really very upset by what was said. It's untrue. It's just not true.
Okay.
And what has been proposed is not workable for 94% of residents. We feel, you can hear how strongly we feel about this. It cannot happen. We've offered a very viable alternative.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you to end.
Okay. Thank you for listening.
No worries. So you may want to just stay.
Okay,
I'm not,
sure.
so Catherine, I'm not going to ask you to respond because obviously we can go back and forth on a dialogue all night.
Thank you.
You're obviously entitled to express your views. However, I suggest you may want to follow up with further conversation or perhaps a meeting that needs to be set up, because I think there's some strong allegations in there that I think my colleague may want to refute. So Mike, just briefly, and as I said, you may want to follow up with some meetings with the residents.
First of all, absolutely, we'll be, as the leader said, be happy to meet you again. And you know that invitation is always open. We do want to listen to your views. What I would say, just in terms of those allegations, is that there, as one example, we've had a disabled people's and carer survey that's been open since May. And actually the respondents to that survey, which have been about 170, nearly half of them are actually from Area C in Bounds Green. So we have that, and a lot of the feedback from that survey actually did go into the redesign up to that point of that particular scheme. So, for instance, the opening up of Durnsford Road came from feedback from residents in the area. Now, obviously, the way that engagement works is that you're not necessarily going to, as the scheme is built, more and more people have become aware of it, more and more people have engaged. But as I've just said, the survey had nearly 50% of people from Area C, and that closed in September. So that was actually up until essentially the beginning of this period. So we have been reaching out to that area, and we have been trying to reach out to all residents as far as we can, and obviously we'll continue that. So the point about this is we are actually in a position of agreement in the sense that we want to reduce overall traffic. It's just how do we get there? And we're willing and absolutely able and doing the listening to you. So that is feeding into that. That is feeding into it, and it will continue to. But I will be happy to meet you out of this to discuss this further and discuss your concerns. Absolutely. Yeah.
Apologies, we just don't allow an ongoing dialogue, but Councillor Catt will be in touch. We've got your details, I presume?
Well,
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for coming tonight, and we'll be in touch. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we do have a second deputation, which is in relation to item 13, and that's on the options for Stapleford North Wing Broadwater Farmers Estate, and it has been brought forward by Mr. Jacob Secker and Chris Houghton, who we're just going to wait for them to come into the room. Thank you. So I've already introduced you. Mr. Secker, Mr. Houghton, you have 3 minutes in total to address the Cabinet. Following that, Cabinet members will have the opportunity to ask you questions, and then I'll ask the relevant Cabinet member to respond. So over to you when you're ready, please.
Good evening, everybody. We've come about the proposal to demolish Stapleford North on the Broadwater Farm Estate as part of the general proposals for various demolitions and rebuilding on our estate. We want you to reject the proposal to demolish Stapleford North for the simple reason that the consultation has been carried out in a very misleading way. The objections relate to the statements we find in the Section 105 consultation pack. Now, I've got a copy here. As far as I can tell from your public reports pack, the Cabinet wasn't actually given this. So promises are being made in your name, especially about rents and other matters, which you haven't actually seen. You don't know what's being promised to the residents. There's nothing new there. I think this is quite familiar from what's been going on at Broadwater Farm. I've emailed it to the entire Cabinet this afternoon when I realised that, so I suggest you do read it, because if this is going out in your name, you need to know what you're promising. It's misleading, especially about rents, as I say. On page 7, it says the rent of the new council homes, which will be built when you demolish Stapleford North, will be calculated on the same basis as your current rent. It does not mean that your rent will be exactly the same as it is now. Now, anyone reading that will say, OK, it's going to be similar then, isn't it? It's not going to be exactly the same. Well, it wouldn't be, although we were promised that some time ago, but it's not going to be exactly the same. Well, what is this new rent going to be? According to the all proposals for new homes rent in Haringey Council in general, which were laid out in the Cabinet report pack for 9th of February 2021, they show that new homes rent would be £69 or £70 a week higher than current Broadwater Farm rents. Now, this is a rent you're proposing across the borough. It's not just for, what some places, not others. It's the whole borough. Now, I've got, which again I've sent to you, and you can get a copy here today. This shows how new homes rent is £69 or £70 a week higher than the average rents we pay in Broadwater Farm. That's a fact, because I know a lot of misleading information comes from the council. I have to be honest, I'm not going to mince my words. A lot of misleading stuff comes from the council to council tenants. A lot of stuff we're told just isn't true. Here it is, no point in denying it. I've got it here. It's £69 or £70 a week more. That's the fact, all right? So let's not waste time denying things which we all know are true. First off, I know that sort of David Joyce is here and said he believes that rents will not be that high, but what are they going to be? We've been asking this since February. What are the rents going to be? There's going to be a ballot on the demolition of various blocks on our estate, Stapleford, North Taming, Northolt, in November, I believe. We're not going to support, we want new homes, of course we do, but we're not going to support a ballot for demolition on the basis that we don't know what the rents are going to be. Sorry?
I'm going to have to ask you to wind up.
We're just not going to do it. We're fed up of being lied to. I sat in a cabinet meeting in 2018 when we did the original consultation on the new homes that were going to be built when they knocked down Northolt and Taming, we were told it was going to be equivalent rent. I said equal rent, everyone nodded, equal rent. That was a lie. I'm sorry, I'm not going to mince my words. That was a lie. We were lied to then. And we are not going to tolerate that. If you carry on just being misleading about the rents that are going to be paid on the new build, the fact is we'll do everything we can to get a no vote. It's that simple. You can't keep doing this to people. You can't keep lying to us, not telling us the truth, misleading us, fobbing us off.
Okay, can you wind up, please?
You know, it's finished. But please, can you, for once, can you actually read the thing you've been asked to agree? I know I've been involved in this for years. I know you don't really read the stuff that you're asked to agree at these cabinet meetings, but please this time, just read the papers before you agree to something.
Up, please?
Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Sorry, I repeated that about 5 times. You had extra. I don't mind people taking a bit extra, but it's actually remarkably disrespectful. I asked you 4 times to wind up. So I don't take too kindly to that.
Well, I'm sorry, but...
Sorry, please do not come back.
This isn't democracy. This is not a democratic procedure.
Can you turn the microphone off, please? Thank you. Does any of the Cabinet have any questions, please? Councillor Das-Neves.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jacob. Just a quick question. Now, just looking at the document that you're quoting out on page 7, and I wonder if I read the line, it does not mean that your rent will be exactly the same as it is now. And I wonder how you interpret that line. It's on page 7.
Anyone reading that just as would interpret that as saying that that would be a similar rent. Just as when we were consulted in 2018, it said the new homes will be for council rent, and it said quite clearly that we were agreeing to having the same number of council homes at council rents as now. Now, anyone reading that would interpret that as saying that it's going to be pretty much the same, equal, equivalent. And I tried to clarify this at a meeting 3 years ago. We've had 3 years of this now. I'm sorry if people think it's disrespectful if I say that people are lying, but the fact is that I represent the tenants of Broadwater Farm, and I cannot just allow this to keep happening, this process of lying, fobbing off, giving false information, pretending things aren't true and everyone knows they're true. It has to stop now. Be honest with people. Yeah, for God's sake, just start being honest with people, please. It's obvious that you're saying it's going to be the similar rent, not £70 a week more. If you've got a different rent in mind, if this was all, if it's not going to be new homes rent, then just put that on the table. Don't keep. Sorry?
It's of course not disrespectful for you to come and raise your issues. That's why you're here, and that's why the process allows. However, you've got a set period of time to do that. You've done this before. I'm sure you're aware of that. Okay? So we're going to now give, if no other Cabinet members want to ask questions, I'm going to move to the Cabinet member who's going to give you a response to this. Okay? Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, thanks for coming along to give your deputation. What we're talking about here is just about the wing of one block, and we've had the consultation. I genuinely don't believe that people have been misled, and there's been an enormous amount of discussion. Our officers have worked extraordinarily hard to contact everybody in that block so that they know exactly what it is that we were consulting about. I myself came up and met you in the resident association. We had quite a robust and good discussion. I heard what you said about the rents, and I'll come back to the rents issue in a moment, but I don't think they've been misled by the council about why we were going to them on a consultation, and the fact that we got 100% response on that, I think, is an indication that people understood and had, read all the documentation that was put in front of them, and they understood that, and we had 100% response of all those eligible 21 residents, and that's come out in favour of 2-to-1 in favour of the block coming down, and those homes being replaced. So, and what it seems to me is that you're asking us to overturn, what the residents have indicated to us that they want. So I don't think that it would be a good idea, because it would be going out, consulting them, and then saying, oh, well, actually, the result that you came out with, we're just going to ignore that. On the question of the rents, actually, your figures are misleading, because they are not the rents that are new rents. I know you're quoting from some document that was put out in the Cabinet papers back in February, which was actually, in fact, this is where there was a mistake made. And I think we've referred to this mistake. We've had this discussion with Defend Council Housing. There was a mistake on the formula rents, which were for 18 houses that were being rented at formula rent, and there were some houses in Errol Court, which was formerly called White Hart Lane, and those residents who had been overcharged, the money was given back to them, and some compensation as well. So the figures you're quoting are wrong, and but I came up, I've had discussions, we are going to go back. We have got really a fantastic scheme in Broadwater Farm. When the scheme is developed out, what we want to achieve there, which I think probably you want to achieve for all of the residents, because I know you live on the estate, and we want that estate to be a fantastic place to live, which it's not at the moment for loads of reasons. And we're not discussing that tonight, but we do want to develop this out. Every resident will be getting the chance to actually have a vote, a full ballot on the proposals as they stand. Once we've come up with the preferred design, they will get a chance to vote on that. On the question of the rents, obviously, before people go into that ballot, they will be the landlord offer will give them a absolutely precise figure on the rent on the new homes. That modelling is being discussed at the moment, and we've got ballpark figures, but I don't particularly want to be pinning it down, because when we finish the designs, then the rents will be worked out on that basis. So once the design is fixed, then everybody will be told exactly what new rents would be. But the whole scheme will be subject to a ballot, and I think it's wrong to frighten people with figures that are not the figures, and it's unfortunate that has happened, because I do think that has been misleading. I do hear what people's fears are, and I'm more than willing to come up anytime I get invited back and speak to the residents, and I know officers are working really hard to make sure all the residents are spoken to and the information that they need is in front of them, and like I say, we're looking at that issue before any ballots take place. There will be a landlord offer, and the rents will be absolutely clearly put out in that. So I think that's all I need to say. There may be officers who want to add to that, I don't know.
That's fine. Councillor Bevan, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I'm going to make a few words as a statement, and then I'm going to ask for your opinion on what I say, because I do think we do need to remember that improving our estates, including our street properties, has a direct relationship to the level of rents that we receive. And I think that's an issue that is not generally talked about or recognised. So it's very important. And I wonder if I can ask both of you, do you agree with that statement that I've made, that our rent income has a direct relationship to how we can improve our existing estates and street properties?
Well, if you look at the figures, there's actually a surplus on the rent over and above the maintenance and the service charges. I mean, that's the issue. So at the moment, we're not getting back everything we pay in rent in terms of services and maintenance and so on, or even management. I mean, I'd love to believe what Councillor Gordon is saying, but I don't, because...
Sorry, Jacob, this wasn't an opportunity to respond to Councillor Gordon. Councillor Bevan's asked you a direct question. In fact, they should have been asked before, but I've allowed it. So can you just respond to that question, please? Yeah. Not respond to Councillor Gordon. Well, this isn't a dialogue.
I mean, it certainly isn't a dialogue. No, I agree.
And you've been here before, so I'm sure you're aware how the process works.
I mean, I suppose the issue is how much, how much rent... Other than the fact that a higher rent on Broadwell Farm would have been a broken promise, it's how much rent are we proposing? I mean, like, for example, on Love Lane, recently, when that proposal went through the Cabinet, it was said in the public reports pack, I think it's David Joyce said, that the rents on the new homes would be much higher for the new tenants, not for the existing tenants. I know on Love Lane who'll get the kind of subsidy, but for the new council tenants will be paying a much higher rent. So the new homes rent on Love Lane is going to be much higher than existing rents, and actually tenants on Love Lane pay about the same sort of rents that we do. They pay less service charge because they don't have concierge, but other than that, the rent is more or less the same. So I am worried that what is this extra rent which you're proposing that we pay? Because I mean, even if Councillor Gordon is saying it's not going to be £70 a week higher, it's going to be much higher than the Love Lane rent, which is the same that we pay at the moment.
Can you wind up, please? Can you wind up, please? Can you wind up, please?
Okay, I mean, to wind up, a promise was made we were going to be paying equivalent rent as we pay now, so we can't be saying now, well, it has to be higher because of extra services.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Gordon, Councillor Bevan. So moving on, so we've adjusted the agenda, so item 13 will be taken next, and you're welcome to stay here whilst that's being heard. So if we move on to agenda item, so we've shifted the agenda, so agenda item 13 is next, and we've read the agenda, and that's the options for the future of Stapleford North Wing, Broadwater Farm. Councillor Gordon, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I mean, we've had some of the sort of discussion really, apart from in terms of what the deputation was requesting, but this paper that's before the Cabinet at the moment is just to make that decision that goes along with the wishes of the residents, a majority of them, and to demolish the Stapleford North Wing. So it's not the Stapleford North block itself, not the high-rise block. It's the wing that would go, that sort of goes across Willen Road, and for the reprovision of those homes within the overall preferred design, and that preferred design will come back to the Cabinet, as that's sort of developed out. So this decision is just in order to take the decision to demolish that block. So I'll just leave my comments there for now.
Okay, can I take questions from the Cabinet? Councillor Catter.
Thank you for this. Yeah, just a couple of questions. One, could you just clarify the number of residents that responded to that consultation and what their response was? And also, obviously, this is a very sort of specific case. But I'm just wondering how it fits in with our default. Can you just clarify that our default position is to not demolish if the circumstances are right?
Yeah, thanks. So it's 20, there's 24 flats, one is unoccupied, and I think another flat was 2 ineligible residents there. So it was 21 eligible people who took part in the consultation, and it was 13 in favour of demolition, 8 against, if that, my maths is correct. So it was a 2 to 1. The reasons was because we understood that if we just built around them, we not just building around them, but they would have had to have lived not on a building site just for the building, but for the demolition itself and the enormous amount of disruption that would take place. We felt it was only right to go back to those residents and say, this is what will happen if you just stay here. Your homes will have to be surrounded by boardings and so on. And so we felt that we had to consult with them, and as this has come back, we think it's only right to go ahead. I've had a lot of discussion. I've been up on the estate several times. There's a lot of talk about the proposals overall, and I think that the engagement with residents has been really good. So there's lots of been pop-up stalls and officers discussing with residents on the overall scheme as well. So I think there has been a lot of engagement. Like I said, I had a meeting with the Residents Association. I'm more than happy to go back again, and hopefully there'll be a few more people next time at the RA, but I'm happy to go up there anytime and discuss that with them. But in terms of why we took that decision, it was because we understood we'd be putting those residents under an enormous amount of stress whilst that block right next to it and attached to it would have to be pulled down, and then the new build on top of that. So that is a massive amount of disruption. So that was the main reason.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Das-Neves.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered, in terms of the next steps, how you'll be incorporating feedback and comments that you've had from residents to inform the process going forward and your work on the estate.
Yeah, thanks. Well, there's actually, I don't know if councillors have all seen the documents that have been produced, but the engagement on the estate has been going on for some time. But obviously, we are coming up to a position now where we would go for a preferred option and building up to a ballot that would take place possibly in the autumn, and the date hasn't been exactly set yet, but it doesn't really stop the engagement. That's sort of ongoing and has been feeding into the architects have been on the site. I actually think it's like a really good proposal, and I think actually, and we did say this was part of the consultation document that we've recently had, that with the removal of that wing, I think it actually means that it's a much more coherent plan going forward than having that wing sort of strung across the main street there. And what we'll be doing is, even whereas that estate at one time was all about walkways in the sky, the new Broadwater Farm is much more about eyes on the street. And I think it's going to be a much more pleasant environment. I think it's going to be a very, very desirable estate to live on. And that is to be applauded, I think, and celebrated, because, it's been a long time. We know what the conditions. I'm not, unaware. I've canvassed on that estate many and many a time. And, unfortunately, that estate's not had the decent homes improvements that it needed to have, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen. And this is a bit of a sea change, I think, as to how, if we can go forward with this now, we're actually going to be able to accelerate these proposals, which I think will be a massive, massive improvement for the residents.
Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else in the room? No. So on the screen, I think I've got Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, and apologies in advance. I'm also having
Hold on. I don't. Your volume's quite low. Hold on. We're just gonna fix it. Okay, do you want to try again?
Yeah, sorry, I'm also having technical problems. I'm actually on my phone. That may be why
Hold
my
on.
volume.
No, it's not. We just got someone in the room trying to fix it. Okay, try now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's fine. Perfect.
Amazing, thank you. And apologies all. I'm also having some technical problems, so I'm on my phone. Hopefully you can all see me okay. Councillor Gordon, I've got 3 questions, if I may. So question 1, we felt it was a real shame that the full comments were only included in the exempt report. Were any of the responses caveated? So, for example, in choosing option 2 on the proviso that their rent wouldn't increase, and if so, were they still counted as picking option 2 despite that caveat? And my second question perhaps relates back to the deputation that we just heard. So the consultation said no tenant or leaseholder will be financially worse off. This means that you will be supported with home loss and disturbance payments. The rent of the new council homes will be calculated on the same basis as your current rent. It does not mean that your rent will be exactly the same as it is now. Now, I'm not sure that I see how any reasonable person could say that that statement made it very clear that the no tenant or leaseholder will be financially worse off actually relates only to the cost of moving home. And I think particularly if English isn't your first language. And I know that we've had those conversations before around the importance of using plain English. So I wonder if the Cabinet member will look to change this language in future to make it much clearer to residents who are actually making a really big life decision, because it is actually quite misleading. And my third question, Councillor Gordon, has the Cabinet taken any learning from the recent Love Lane ballot in advance of the Broadwater Farm ballot? If yes, what are those? Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of the responses in the exempt part of the report, we can't discuss them. There's a very small number of people that took part in the consultation, obviously, by virtue of the fact there's only 21 eligible residents, and we don't want them identified. So I'm not prepared to say that, but they will be discussed in the exempt part of the meeting. But obviously we will be taking into consideration all the comments that were made. I mean, some people would have made comments about whether they are, at the moment they would welcome the idea of being able to move to a home that suits their housing need, for example, things like that. So there was, some negative comments, some positive comments, but and of course we will be taking those into account. In terms of the paragraph that you read out, so in that paragraph, it actually is clear that when we talk about the cost of moving, we are referring to the costs of moving, so your moving costs, and that is clear. And that it's, you read out the sentence that the rent is calculated as any other council rent is calculated, and using the formula. So if you were to move to another council home, and you would expect to pay a different rent, depending on where it is, depending on the size of it that it is, and so on. So that's what it means by being calculated on the same basis. We had people, translators available, the ability to translate the documents, the consultation document, and council officers have been on the estate all the time, explaining everybody had been spoken to, in addition to it wasn't just that they were handed a document and expected to take it all in. There was discussions held and plenty of opportunity to ask questions. And sorry, can you just remind me what your third question was?
Yeah, of course. Has the Cabinet taken any learning from the recent Love Lane ballot in advance of the Broadwater Farm ballot? And if yes, what were those?
Well, again, we're not sort of discussing what happened at the Love Lane estate ballot, but I've heard a lot of noise on social media. We have had discussions with officers about the conduct of the Love Lane ballot, and I'm absolutely and totally confident that that ballot was carried out along the guidelines that are in the GLA guidelines and according to our own protocols. The idea that officers were out on a Saturday night was not true. The idea that officers were intimidating people is not true. I would want to make sure that our officers don't just go knocking on doors on their own, and that they are accompanied by somebody. And we've made sure that people are able to translate. It was our job to ensure that people on the Love Lane estate understood exactly what was in that landlord offer. That was our primary concern. And actually, we spoke to officers even this morning, and they've withstood quite a lot of abuse, actually, which I think is really out of order. Being photographed, being followed around, being shouted at, and our staff don't deserve that. And I think that sort of behaviour is appalling. But I'm quite convinced that our officers carried out their job to the best of their ability and enabled people to understand exactly what it is that they were voting for, and we got the result was the result what it was. So that maybe lessons learned, but it's about the fact that our staff did a good job, and we must always provide for the security of our staff as well. So I would just put that in there.
That's helpful. Thank you, Councillor Gordon.
Thank you. So the decision for this will be taken after exempt item 22. So can we move on to item 9, which is the 2021-22 finance update, quarter 1, and I believe Councillor Diakides. Thank you.
Just very briefly, Chair, I think the report is quite self-explanatory. Nothing exciting really, beyond to say that the outcome until now looks to be well within the parameters that we have adopted, which is pretty good, bearing in mind all the uncertainties and the pandemics and the financial troubles of other authorities. Still, the situation obviously is very challenging for us, but it seems that until now, that's good. We are on course to stay within our medium-term financial strategy overall. There are some little improvements here and there, nothing to write home about. Be happy, and the director will be happy to answer any questions on the detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Diakides. Do we have any questions? No, it really isn't exciting, is it? You're quite right. So we've got recommendations as laid. Oh, apologies, Councillor Palmer. You're quite distant from me, so I'm sorry to miss you.
I know.
Councillor Palmer.
Sorry, well, I clearly found it more exciting. I've got 3 questions for you, Councillor Diakides. So, question 1. In Appendix 4, 43.4 million of spending aimed to help the local economy is now delayed. So, considering the impact of the borough's high streets, considering the impact on the borough's high streets and businesses in the last year and a half, why are schemes such as the Good Economy Recovery Plan at 582,000 and the Future High Street project at 6 million not being delivered on time? My second question, Appendix 4 shows existing capital stock repairs programme is behind. So considering the backlog of repairs due to COVID, is the council considering any backlog recovery expenditure, either revenue or capital, is required to get those repairs back on track? And my last question, given Haringey's declared a climate emergency, why is the additional carbon reduction project, that's on page 77, line 4009, being put on hold? Thank you.
I think some of the questions go to some more detail, which I can ask the officers to provide you with information straight away. On a broad way, we have expanded substantially our capital program in general, sort of everything, and it just happens to be at the same time as the pandemic having an impact on the construction industry, the availability of things, and delaying everything around. So I think we do have to accept that there have been delays and there will be delays. What we have been assured is that no resources have been lost in the meantime as a result of that, or no project has been completely abandoned or in any way, but just probably slipped a bit further away. I think we got to realize that our capital program now is larger than the average for other authorities, starting from a very low base 2 to 3 years ago. So that is one of the main things. As regards the very specific issues that you raised, or the specific examples that you raised, I will ask the relevant officers if it is okay to give you more detailed explanations. Thank you. Between John and David, you can provide more information.
Yeah, I mean, just on the Good Economy Recovery Plan funding, I mean, I'd be happy to sort of answer in more detail to Councillor Palmer, but we have absolutely sort of had our foot on the pedal in terms of spending the money that we've allocated. We are also working with external funding. I think it is worth saying, though, that on some areas, and this is what you were alluding to, Councillor Diakides, on, say, the Reopening High Street Safety Fund, the spend was delayed because we had further lockdowns that we weren't necessarily anticipating when we were allocated the money, and it was actually appropriate to hold some of the funding back. But we're happy to sort of look into any further specifics, but just to give the general reassurance that we're absolutely not holding back on any of those Good Economy Recovery Plan projects.
It's okay, that answers all the questions. Okay. Right.
Sorry, there was the third question about the climate emergency funding. It was the additional.
Do you want to pick that up? There was a question.
Page 77, the question, the specific.
Yeah, it was around the additional carbon reduction project.
Oh, the carbon capture project. Yeah, David, you put the leaders.
Sorry, I don't have the reference in front of me, so I'm just going to pull it up. But yeah, let me just check the reference if that's okay.
Check it. So it's on page you're looking. Oh, okay.
I have page 77, line 4009.
Yeah, okay. If Councillor Palmer's fine, we'll follow up with a written answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine, thanks.
Thank you. So if there's no more questions, if we can move to a resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out at page 49, paragraphs 3.1 to 3.11 of the agenda pack. Are we happy to agree? Agreed, thank you. So if we can move to item 10, which is the housing delivery scheme at Templeton, and there's some revised costs approval, and it's on pages 93 to 98, and Councillor Gordon, over to you.
Hi, yes, just to be a brief introduction, this is a scheme that's going to deliver 11 new council homes. It was one of the first direct deliveries for this council in about 40 years, so it is a major achievement. Unfortunately, we've got to come back and ask for a little bit of extra money, a net increase of 118,866 in the contract. I think there's probably some lessons learned out of this project that we didn't get it quite right in the first place. However, the increase in the costs are in line with our cost assumptions and in line with the budget of the whole housing delivery programme. So just because some of you eagle-eyed cabinet members and members who have joined us tonight will see that there's two figures mentioned in different paragraphs, but the figure is the net increase that we're asking for is 118,866, and that's the figure that appears in the recommendations. So we don't need to move any amendment or anything like that. It's just that it's later on down in paragraph. I think I want to say 6.6 or something like that. No, it's not 6.6, sorry, but a few paragraphs further down, it's got a slightly different figure, but the figure is 118,866, with a gross increase of 252,000. So yeah, all of the details of the additional costs are detailed in paragraph 6 onwards. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Councillor Bevan?
Yeah, as this was one of our first house building projects for many, many years, can I just ask the officers if they or we have learnt any lessons that will do us in good stead for our future projects?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. Yes, I mean, this was our first scheme that we took forward. It was while our then new development procedures were in draft and weren't in operation at that point. So obviously we have our development procedures in place. It was all, we also, I think, there were mistakes made by the employer's agent. We did replace the employer's agent on this scheme. There were mistakes made by the project manager, and the project manager's no longer with us either. The costs associated with things like gas pipe diversions, UKPN, new supplies, Section 278 costs, the tender documents are all much clearer about that. We also have guidance in the development procedures that if there isn't a budget for those items within the contracts, that the EA and cost consultant carry out a levelling out exercise to make sure those risks are in there. And we also incorporate sort of earlier and better engagement with Network Rail and other adjoining owners into the process as well. So I think there are a number of mistakes that were made that I don't expect to see in any subsequent projects.
Thank you, Robbie. Any more questions? Councillor Brabazon?
Just to follow up from what Councillor Bevan said, on paragraph 6.4, there's a reference to new development procedures. I wonder if the officers could just explain slightly on what those might include, given the fact that we have obviously learned something from this particular development. Thank you.
I think I've set out I guess some of the main changes that came out of the learnings from this. I mean, the development procedures are a very, very long and detailed document, which I guess takes our project managers through every stage of the project. Like I said, for this project, they weren't actually live and they weren't in operation. But obviously, we have a detailed set of procedures that every project manager knows that they need to follow. We constantly update it, so I think we've updated it 2 or 3 times since we developed the first set of these, and we'll continue to do so as we learn through projects going forwards.
Thank you. Are we any more questions? No. Okay. So can we move to? Oh, I've got Councillor Palmer.
You have.
Sorry. I'm not purposefully forgetting you. I promise. So over to you.
I'm very far away. I appreciate that. Councillor Gordon, just one question, if I may. How many of the promised 1,000 council homes will be completed and habitable by May 2022? Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Palmer, can I just hand over to, just because I will probably end up giving you a wrong figure on these, start on site, and I think we can include those in the answer to the question, but I hand over to Mr. Erdman.
There are a few that are in the mix, but it'll be somewhere around 200, we think. But it'll be 200 or very close to 200.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So if we can move to resolution, I'm sure there's no one else on the screen, is there? No. Okay, so the resolution is to approve the recommendations as set out at paragraphs 93 to 90 pages, sorry, 93 to 94 of the agenda pack. Do we agree? Good. Thank you. So moving on to agenda item 11, which is Stroud Green Primary School, and this is phase 2 of the external envelope and building services improvement works, and it's the award of construction contract, and I'm going to hand over to Councillor Brabazon.
Well, this is the second, this is a phase 2 report for Stroud Green Primary School for its capital improvement works, and is, I hope, quite a straightforward report, simply asking Cabinet to agree the contract for £1,498,628 for additional works for Stroud Green Primary School. I'm not sure, Chair, that there's much more to say. The report details what the works will be, but it's really in relation to all the sorts of works which the council is responsible for as landlord for the schools, and I hope Cabinet will approve this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brabazon. Does anyone have any questions on the public part of the report? No one in the room. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you. 2 questions, Councillor Brabazon, if I may. First question, how long are the students expected to be moved away from the school building for? And second question, how are we ensuring the safety of children is paramount? So, for example, ensuring that large construction vehicles and lorries are not parked in very obvious no parking zones directly outside schools, as is my current experience with the building work taking place at Lordship Lane School. Thank you.
Well, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'll certainly be bringing that up with the officers. I didn't quite catch your first question.
First question, sorry, it was for how long are the students expected to be moved away from the school building?
I think I'd probably have to check with the officers from that and come back to the written reply.
No problem, thank you.
We've got Anne and Kat on the call. I don't know if they can answer this. Is anyone, are they there? Sorry, I can't see. Who's got the hand up? Okay, Claire.
Hi, yeah, Claire Barnes. I'm one of the delivery team managers in Major Projects team. I can assist with those two questions. Very similarly to phase one, there's no intention to move the children out. We've done a very strict phasing program to make sure that we can do these condition intrusive works in and around the school. So we've detailed where we need to work, any decanter arrangements within the school. So we've worked that through quite thoroughly with the head teacher and the school staff. In terms of the second point, I will pick up separately Lordship Lane, because that's also in my domain. We work very closely with contractors around all of their deliveries, the specific times for schools. They have part of their construction phase plan, how they're going to manage safely deliveries to site. And we also are adhering to the new school street scene, which is obviously also limiting delivery certain times of day. So if there's anything particular at Lordship Lane that's happening at the moment, I can go and take that back to officers and pick that up.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks, Claire. So the decision for this will be taken after exempt item 20. So if we can move to item 12, which is Selby Urban Village Design Team contract variation, and Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this is a development near to White Hart Lane and almost on the borders of Enfield. It's a 200 plus homes development with the reprovision of the Selby Centre and a new sports facility. All we're asking for in this report, though, is for a variation in the contract with KCA, the architects. That's because there's three main reasons for that. One is because of COVID has meant some delay with the of how we've been able to work together with the Selby Centre in sort of co-producing this scheme, and there's some extra costs attributed to that, and bringing forward the design process. So with this extra cost, we should be able to get that design process up to REBA stage 3, which means that we'd have some, detailed designs, and that would come back to a future cabinet, and that would include, business case development in co-production with the Selby Centre. There's also additional requirements because of the London Plan being adopted that are means that there are extra costs involved. So all of that means that we're looking for an extra 855,000 to take this scheme forward. But the scheme itself will come back to a future cabinet meeting.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on the public part of the report? Councillor Catter.
Yeah. So my understanding from this report is that this variation is due to the fact that is specifically to do with engagement with the public and the need to complete that work in a co-design way. I'm just wondering if that is related to the sort of placemaking side of the portfolio.
Well, it absolutely means that we wanted to do this in as a co-production method. It's a big scheme, and we want to make sure that we've got everything right on this, and working with the Selby Centre and other stakeholders. Then with COVID, that means that we've had some delay. We've had there is some complications about the sports facilities and so on and so forth. And when you're sort of going through these designs, you've got to be able to work it out. We've got to make sure our viability is spot on, and all of those negotiations and discussions and working together with community organisations like as important as the Selby Centre is to the borough. I think that's really important, and we've prioritised that, which means that we have got some extra costs, and that is a part of them are attributed to that sort of method of working, which is desirable, but we have to recognise that it has cost us a small amount extra. But I think that what we'll get out of it at the end of the day is a very detailed scheme that is actually going to work.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions in the room? Councillor Baberson?
It's not really a question, but on page 111, in the table, I think there's a slight error. It says they'll submit the full planning application February, March 2021. I assume that means 2022. Is that correct? And in the light of all the work that has to be done, is that a realistic timetable?
Is Peter on the call? I was. In terms of being realistic, your eagle eyes have spotted that the data's wrong. So well done, top marks. But maybe I could ask Peter to come in terms of how realistic that is, if that's okay, Peter.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question, and thank you for spotting the error as well. It's absolutely correct. Yeah, I think we're fairly confident. The work to date with the Selby Trust has been progressing relatively well, especially recently. We're very pleased with some of the progress, especially on key chapters of the business plan, most notably around the sports element, which is referenced in the report. So we're looking forward to kind of progressing the work at pace in the coming months. So I think we feel fairly confident about being able to meet those dates.
Thank you, Peter. Is there any other questions in the room? Councillor Palmer?
Thank you. Just one question, if I may. It's kind of following on from Councillor Hurkata. So earlier on, we heard some challenges to the council's concept of co-design. Councillor Gordon, could you just explain a little bit more about the co-design kind of process that's being put into place? And I know you kind of talked loosely about that in terms of your response to Councillor Hurkata, but I think it would be really good to understand perhaps the mechanisms that are being used and how we're consulting and working with different stakeholders. Thank you.
Again, I think I'd quite like to, because of the detail of that, I'd quite like if Peter could come in on that.
Yeah, and thank you for the question, Councillor. I think, in a sense, this goes way beyond code design. I mean, I think placemaking can probably be understood as a spectrum, of which sort of consultation kind of is probably, somewhere in the middle of all of that. Co-design a bit further over. Co-production is when you're working kind of hand in glove, not just on the kind of design process, but also on the implementation and what happens thereafter. So I think this is a really good example where from the very outset we entered into a memorandum of understanding with the Selby Trust, which set out a number of key principles that we were all going to work together on long before many of the key ingredients had actually been kind of fully worked through and fully understood. And that sort of sense of working in partnership with the third sector organisation, I think really defines this particular project. In terms of some of the tools that we've used, it varies. So, for example, in this particular instance, it's not about us doing everything. I think that's a quite important distinction as well. So the Selby Trust themselves have, for example, been working very, very hard on what the future looks like for themselves as an organisation and what kind of the new facilities and the new offer looks like and how that can be operated efficiently. We had to, for example, recently work through some of the issues around, for example, the sports issue, again, which I mentioned, and that's involved a lot of co-working between colleagues in sports and leisure and the Selby Trust to think through what does the offer look like and what is the role of the respective organisations. When it comes to design, they've been intimately involved in the whole design process, effectively co-clients to the process, although obviously we are formally the client for the purposes of financial accountability and the rest of it, but to all intents and purposes, we've been working hand in glove with them on the design process as well. One of the key advantages in working with an organisation like the Selby Trust is, of course, they have a huge number of connections into not only their immediate tenants, but also the wider community as well. And so, of course, we've been working really, really closely with them on both the kind of the engagement of both their tenants and wider community stakeholders and the community more generally on aspects of the design as they evolve as well. So using their networks, their capacity, and indeed their strengths as well. So that's been another really important key feature of the process as well.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, so I'm just checking. So the decision for this, there's no more questions. The decision for this will be taken after except item 21. So if we can move on to item 14, which is the variation of contract for 1 to 35 Headcorn Road and 51 to 92 Tenterton Road fire safety works, and over to Councillor Bevan to introduce the report.
Yeah, this is a contract to do additional fire safety works at this estate. I would just say, I expect you've all received an email from the HDBG Residents Association raising some issues. A draft response has been completed, but I think there's some more details that the association would like. So I'm planning to ask the director to visit and talk to the chair and the secretary of the Residents Association, which is a very active association. I think the director is actually online at the moment, so I'll ask her if she was happy to do that and if she thinks that's a good option.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay, so is that okay? Is that what you required?
Did she, Judith, did you hear that?
Yeah, she said she's happy to do it. Yeah.
I didn't hear that, so.
Okay. Does anyone in the room have any questions for Councillor Bevan? Councillor Brabazon?
It really was in relation to these emails. I think that I have met the person who wrote the emails. I've known them a long time through community work, and found a measured sort of group of people. So I was rather when I read this, I did want to know that we would get an assurance that all these issues that people have raised in their email would be in their correspondence. They bothered to write us very, very detailed, annotated, and evidence sort of correspondence. So obviously we want all these fireworks to be to standard, and we want to make sure everything is right. So can we get an assurance that I'm sure it will, that the officers will follow up with the residents to make sure that all the issues that they raise are dealt with, and that they're clarified and managed.
I will ensure that happens, and if anyone from the association is watching this meeting, I'd be very impressed if you could send me a text saying you'll really be pleased to meet the director. I think that would be very impressive. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, just to confirm, like Robbie, Judith and I are very happy to give you that commitment and make sure that we follow up and have the meeting, as you've suggested, Councillor Bevan and Councillor Brabazon.
Okay, do we have anyone on screen who wants to come in on this? I didn't see you down, Councillor Palmer. No, okay, you've not got your hand up on this one. Okay, so the decision for this will be taken after exempt item 23. So if we can move on to item 15, which is minutes of other bodies, and Cabinet's been asked to note the minutes of Cabinet member sign-ins and urgent decisions as set out on these pages. So can we just note those, please? If we move on to item 16, significant and delegated actions. These are laid out on pages 185 to 194. So can Cabinet note the significant and delegated actions as set out at these pages, please? And if we move on to item 17, new items of urgent business, there are none. Okay, so we're on to the exempt part of the meeting. I don't believe we have any press present or members of the public at this point. Shall I just pause for a couple of minutes? Okay, right. So I'm going to move that the press and public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting, and to consider the exempt information as defined under paragraphs 1, 2, 3 and 5 part 1 schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Do Cabinet agree? Agreed. Excellent. So I'm now formally closing the public section.